Hey, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Sylvester here, the cat's here once again, and I'm back for some more of the Merxy Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to more Let's Play of the forms of Kirby, Knightmare, and Dreamland for the Game Boy Advance. So last time we actually did manage to beat the likes out of, King Dedede first of all, and also beat the likes out of the Knightmare, in the forms of the true final boss in the forms of Kirby, Knightmare, and Dreamland. So, yeah, today for this episode, folks, is the extra video of how this game offers to be. Now, as far as I've mentioned this before, this version of the game, or this rendition of Kirby's Adventure, does have a lot more content than the likes of how it does in the original Kirby's Adventure. Like, for instance, the first thing I'd like to showcase off of this is the forms of the extra mode. Like I mentioned this before, and especially noticeable that Mickey Mouse already mentioned about this before, extra mode is essentially the hard mode of the game. Like, you actually get yourselves 3 units of health instead of the usual 6. However though, unlike the ones in the original Kirby's Adventure, you can't able to save your progress every time you actually enter in, like, the next new world or something like that. In this version of the game, you can now actually save your progression this time around though, which even then, it just makes a little bit of more of a differences when it comes to the original version of the forms of, you know, Kirby's Adventure than the likes of, you know, Knightmare and Dreamland. So, with that being said, you can now actually, continue where you left off this time around, though, than in forms of this particular rendition of Kirby's Adventure than the likes of the original counterpart. So, even then, though, that, thankfully, you don't have to, like, restart the entire, thing all over again with one session, unless if you're actually playing this on the NES version. So, with that being said, though, it still plays exactly the same games of how it does in the forms of the normal game, except the fact that you do have 3 units of health this time instead of like the usual 6. Now, as you can see right there, I've got myself 14 extra 1-ups right there. This most likely because, holy crap, that particular extra mode is actually a lot difficult in this particular game, even compared to how it does it on the NES version counterparts, because Knightmare, for instance, that in the first form, while I did manage to done this no problem in the forms of the normal mode, for some reason I had a hard time on this particular rendition of this mode. Granted, that's only because you do have 3 units of health instead of 6. Well, and also because of how the fact that, well, the boss fights themselves in the forms of action mode doesn't really change much in terms of boss patterns and all that stuff. It still pretty much impacts the exact same patterns of how it does in the forms of the normal playthrough. So, if that's the case, then even then though, they can probably guarantee of how this will turn out. And of course, since I'm playing this on the extra mode on my own time, especially as you can see on the actual final boss of the game again already, that's only because of how the fact that since I managed to do this off screen, I managed to able to actually once again get myself all these switches activated. So even then though, that the switch locations in the forms of extra mode places them exactly the same placements of how it does in a normal playthrough or the normal mode, although except the fact you do have less health compared to how it does in the normal mode of the game. But with that being said, if you manage to able to actually complete extra game, it doesn't matter what accomplishments you got to deal with right there. And as you can see, I've managed to beat the Knightmare for a second time. And as you can tell, after when you get every single switch is active, especially noticeable if you actually play this on extra mode, you get yourself something different for a change, like the forms of, first of all, we got ourselves the 100% complete, but now it says like extra, and it says you are amazing 4 times. Because as you can see on this little screen image. Now, I don't think you can actually get everything if you manage to complete the game on 100% in the extra mode, but if you do manage to complete the regular extra mode, this will give you an awesome unlockable, which even then though, you know, after we actually go through this little sequences right there. So even then though, with that being said, I apologize of how the fact that I'm just going a little bit too rusty at that one point or another. It's only really because of how the fact that it's been a long while since I've actually managed to able to actually record something like this. Because even then, it's been a couple of days. But even then though, it still is usually uploaded and during the likes of today was actually forms of the 28th of May. So you know what that means? We've only got about barely 2 weeks left until the forms of Nintendo E3 2018. Or in this case, 2 weeks left in the forms of the Square Enix E3 2018 stuff, which still I'm really looking forward to it, especially noticeable in the forms of Kingdom Hearts 3 stuff. So with that being said, Yeah, that's what I can say about it, but it forms of the extra mode of this game, honestly, guys, because even then, though, you know, it still plays exactly like how it does in the normal play, except the fact that, or the normal game, rather, but except the fact that you get yourselves a different, imagery every time you're actually completely done with 100% complete of the forms of this particular version of the game. And obviously, this is a prime example of how the fact that I probably can't do the second playthrough, including the third playthrough of this game. Because of that, though, you'll see why in just a moment. However, though, the staff credit sequence after when you beat the extra game is completely different, though, on the other hand, because it's now a showcase of the extra strategies of the forms of these mini bosses. And even then, though, unlike the ones in the normal game, that normally just shows off the forms of, you know, just the you know, the regular boss, you know, montages and all that stuff. But even then, though, that does looks pretty, cool to the eyes, in my opinion. But even then, though, yeah. So yeah, with that being said, though, it still plays the exact same music every time when it gets to the staff credit sequences, as you can see right there, and it still says the exact same, people who actually made this game. And even especially noticeable by the forms of, you know, just the exact same text. Although, except when we actually finish up with the forms of, you know, the staff credit sequences, which I'll get into in a second or two. But even then, though, I can't wait to be able to actually just to see what extra content we can able to get. What in forms of after when you beat the, you know, the extra game of the forms of Kirby, Knightmare, and Dreamland. I'm pretty sure the footage they actually did showcase off, it was actually forms of the montages of every single mini bosses in the forms of it most likely showcase off in this in the forms of Rainbow Resort 2, which even then, though, I did occasionally die in the forms of extra modes, because there were a few times, though, I managed to able to actually keep on running to every single enemy sometimes. And even especially noticeable how the fact that some of these mini bosses, even, well, not so bad in the forms of extra boss fights, or in this case the actual official bosses, well, one exception being by the forms of the first phase of the forms of, oh wow, I did not realize how this Bugsy right here is now red. At first I thought it was actually forms of green, but in forms of my actual own perspective right there. But it turns out it's actually forms of red color this time around, though, which I haven't saw that one coming, don't I? Think about it. But anyways, though, as soon as you see the actual final scene of this little staff credits right there, staff credits number 2, for instance, you can able to actually see of how the fact that we get ourselves this, not only the actual main purpose of the forms of, another, you know, screenshot of the forms of this particular Star Wars, but way more further, beyond. So even then, it does look pretty cool, though. But also, as you can see right there, we actually now get ourselves our Meta Knightmare, which is essentially the third playthrough of the game, but in forms of, well, we'll explain more details as soon as we're able to actually jump into it. And as you can see, I've pretty much gotten every single 100% completionist in the forms of my save file. So with that being said, every time you get yourselves 100% between both of those modes of the game, I'm pretty sure you get yourselves a different rankings, depends on what completionist you're actually going through, but in forms of, well, obviously I've already achieved Superstar, but in forms of getting myself 100% completion of both normal mode and extra game. So that's pretty top notch. And of course, as you can see right there, we got ourselves a sound test, which even then, though, unlike the ones in the original counterparts, you have to unlock that specific mode if you want to be able to actually go through the main game again with extra game on the forms of the original Kirby's Adventure. But except the fact that you don't have to, like, you can't actually save your progress, unless if you actually access to the Wii U Virtual Console version at this point in time. So even then, if you want to stop what you're doing, then you're pretty much guaranteed how the fact that you could potentially try to able to continue where you left off. So with that being said, yeah, that's what I can really say about it, but in forms of actually unlocking something very, very cool and awesome at the same time. Especially noticeable how the fact that I would able to actually showcase off from this. And also how the fact that I'm probably not going to be, doing the second and the third playthrough of this game because of how the fact that it plays exactly the same as each other, but minus some differences, mind you. But even then, no. As you can see right there, we're actually going to be playing some of these sub-games, like the forms of, we've already mentioned about this before, how the fact that there are 3 sub-games in total if you manage to able to play through the game on your main adventure, but in forms of, well, first off we have Quick Draw right there, which we've already mentioned about this before, Oh wow, I got myself redraw already again? Okay. Seems simple enough. Basically you get yourselves quick draw and Kirby's air grind, and especially noticeable with the bomb relay. So with that being said, this particular minigames does have 3 difficulty settings, just like how it does in the forms of the 4 difficulty settings in the forms of some of these minigames in Kirby 64 the Crystal Shards, or even especially noticeable with the forms of Megaton Punch, and especially noticeable with Samurai Kirby in the forms of Kirby Superstar, the fact that you got yourselves 3 different difficulties you select. Every time you actually get into the next difficulty, the more the tougher opponents they can get. But in forms of fast time reflexes, or even especially noticeable, they obviously know how the time to react to it, so even then, oh wow, that was way too fast there. Oh well, guess I might as well try this again, because of that, I was way too slow on that one, so... Obviously, level 3 is a crapshoot, because even then though, I could not expect to see how the fact that some of these my skills and tactics cannot even go way too fast on that part. So yeah, you have to be right on with that specific timing if you want to be able to actually proceed to the next opponent and onwards. Mainly due to how the fact that you start things off with Waddle Doo, and then Wheelie and Chef Kamsuriki, which again I do apologize for that little last name pronunciation, but and also King Diddy and Mennonite at the very end, which I still found out that no, not so much for King Diddy, but Mennonite is actually way more tougher than it looks when it comes to able to actually deal with him in the forms of the actual quick draw minigame, which I was a little bit somewhat all sarcastic or what have you. So the next minigame, as you can see right there we're playing through, is the forms of bomb relay. As far as you guys should already know, I pretty much suck at this minigame. It's nothing too much of it on its identity by itself. It's just how the fact that every time when I was trying to press the A button at the exact right time, for some reason I just keep on getting a little bit of a delay syndrome, which even then, I keep on mashing the A button and that's all I have to do there. So I'm able to actually get myself a little bit safe there. But for some reason, I keep on losing on this minigame for some reason. I think it's most likely because of my lack of timing skills and all that stuff. Which, even though, granted though, we've actually did manage to get ourselves 3rd place in during the likes of the main playthrough of the game. But for some reason though, I keep on getting onto 3rd place position, which even though, there's no way I can guarantee to get myself first place or 2nd place, because I did try those in my original cartridge only version of the game, but for some reason I'm just doing pretty terrible in the forms of the Wii U's Virtual Console version. Plus the level 3 difficulty is still pretty high when it comes to computer opponents and stuff like that, because obviously the different amount of speed when it comes to able to, you know, tossing the bomb, or in this case the bomb, right onto any other Kirbys and all that stuff, which even then, that does a little bit more dramatic and stuff like that. So, next minigame we're going to be hopping into is the forms of one of my favorites of the 3, and that's the forms of the Kirby's air grind, which as you can tell, I'm pretty much be expert at this minigame because of how the fact that how this minigame actually works out to be. Especially noticeable how the fact that you need to be right on with your timing skills when it comes to hopping off the rail and all that stuff, because if you manage to keep on getting yourselves good or great, the more faster you can go. So even though if you accidentally manage to step onto this little spike rails, you'll actually slow down for quite some time. So even though that makes it a little bit more of a, well, a really fun minigame out of that. Of course, you can play this as a multiplayer. This could be ranged for up to 4 players. So even though if you want to actually play the sub-minigames with your friends, be sure to able to actually go after the forms of the Game Boy Advance cable links. So with that being said, if you manage to obtain one of those, you can able to have some fun with these things. So, yeah, especially noticeable by the forms of, you know, Kirby's air grind especially though, because it's way too intense and all that stuff. Although the timing skills, especially noticeable how the fact that if you keep on getting onto this little spike rails, it doesn't matter though, because even then though, as you can see right there, I've got myself 2nd place this time around though, which even then though sounds a little bit different for one another. So now let's move on to level 3. I think the only major difference between all 3 of those difficulties when it comes to Kirby's air grind is the forms of how lengthy and how long this will take, which even then though, especially noticeable by the forms of some of these spike rails, can usually just manage to place it all over the place when it comes to some of these different placements of these rails in line. So, yeah, that's pretty cool when it comes to able to actually get ourselves a little bit more of a, the fun, sub-games. Personally, I think that the Bomb Relay can go bottom of the list in my opinion, just because of how the fact that I'm pretty much sucking when it comes to timing and all that stuff. I think I need to get a lot of practice on that minigame on my own time though, or maybe just because of how the fact that this little particular confusion of my directions, although sometimes manage to able to, doesn't react to in time. But with that being said, that concludes the main 3 sub-minigames that you can able to get in this particular game alone. Even especially noticeable, you can also play this on your own time in the forms of your single-player adventure. So yeah, that's pretty cool stuff. Now we move on to boss endurance, which obviously, just like how it does it from before, we're actually going to be faced off against with the previous boss fights you've already fought through in the forms of your previous adventure, except the fact the matter is that you only have to do this with one go. So this could be ranged from bosses between, you know, Wispy Woods all the way up to Knightmare. So with that being said, I don't think there's any way we can able to do this though, honestly, because much like how it does in the forms of Kirby's Adventure, Kirby's Dreamland 2, Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards, it's pretty much optional though if you want able to actually tackle for this mode in particular. Unless if you want to actually do this with a no damage run, then good luck with that, because even then that can checks out there. So yeah, with that being said though, there's no way we can actually get ourselves a recovery station until whenever we go back into the forms of well, it doesn't have the recovery station, but it forms of, you know, similar to the ones in Kirby Superstar and all that stuff. But don't worry, when we get to Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, things can get pretty much comfortable when it comes to boss endurance modes like this. So, but of course, this is the unlockable sub-game you want to actually unlock first is the fact that in order to actually unlock this... Oh, by the way, you can able to actually obtain those Kirby abilities, I just realized, every time you actually get into certain boss battles like this. Especially noticeable how the fact that, I'm pretty sure Mickey Mouse doesn't notice that in the forms of the original Kirby's Adventure, but it's pretty cool though to be able to actually get yourselves Kirby abilities every time you're doing battle, which I think I really appreciated with this kind of stuff. But even then, no, unlike the ones in both Kirby's Dreamland 3 and Kirby Superstar, that actually requires the 100% completion when it comes to able to actually tackling through, you know, the boss endurance mode. But even then, no, as I mentioned this before, this is entirely optional though if you want to be able to actually go for the sake of everything. So, unless if you want to be able to actually, well, before the future Kirby games, but in forms of, you know, Kirby Superstar Ultra, Kirby's Return to Dreamland, or Kirby's Adventure Wii, and even especially noticeable with Kirby Triple Deluxe, and even Kirby Planet Robobots, and even Kirby Star Allies, that you have to able to actually go through boss endurance until you're able to 100% through everything, pretty much. So, there's not much else to talk for this point when it comes to the boss endurance in this game, because it plays exactly like how it does in Kirby's Adventure, except the fact that, well, obviously it's on the Game Boy Advance, and plus the faster processing can take way more quicker than I actually expected it to, and plus, as you can see right there, we got ourselves a time limit to deal with right there this time around though, which I don't really think that the time limit doesn't feature that in the forms of the original Kirby's Adventure, I don't feel like. But even then, no, that's mainly because of the fact that it's only score-based system or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. But I digress for this point in onwards. But I digress. So here we go with Cracker right there. I think this is the only boss fight I've actually got into in my original Game Boy Advance cartridge only version of that game, because I've found the fact that I'm a little bit too risky by this point when it comes to speed things up a little bit. I think speed running through buddy forms of the boss endurance can get pretty good for you if you have some tactics going on with you, but other times like I do, I just keep on getting too risky for myself there. So even though, with that being said, the only boss fight I've actually got into in the boss endurance is that similar to the ones in the original Kirby's Adventure Let's Play, I've actually got into the forms of King Dedede boss fight once again, because of how the fact that there is no way I can able to actually deal with him with just one unit of health left, because if even then, just like before, if you manage to able to actually just die, or even especially noticeable if you keep on getting a game over on that specific boss rush or the boss endurance run, you have to go back to the beginning from Wispy Woods and then just try that again. So even that being said though, there's not much anything else new here, or in this case especially noticeable, there's nothing else to it though. So with that being said, yeah, that's what I can say about boss endurance. And even then, I managed to keep my hammer ability from, you know, after dealing with Meta Knight right there. But as you can see, I've somehow died by King DDD boss fights, just like how it does in the forms of the original Kirby's Adventure playthrough. But that's how this goes. So, here we are on to the final extra thing of how this game offers to be, and that's the forms of Meta Knightmare. And obviously, we do need to unlock this sub-game in order to actually just go through extra game with your own time, but this time around though, you can now actually save the game. So, save Dreamland as Meta Knight. So let's see how this will check out to be. Obviously, this is actually the third time playing through the actual game, except the fact that we can actually play as Meta Knight in this particular mode right there, which I think is really, really cool. Meta Knight has set out to practice his swordplay, use his blade to clear the way. Now, just like the ones in Extra mode in the original Kirby's Adventure, this is one of those modes that you cannot save your progression, unless if you actually do this on your one single run through without even turning off the main game. Well, at least that's besides the point right there, so yeah, with that being said, Meta Knightmare, as far as the actual mode itself, it plays exactly like how it does it for both normal mode and extra game. I say extra mode specifically though, because as you can see there, just like in extra game, Meta Knightmare actually holds up to your 3 units of health, just like how it does in extra mode. And as you can see right there, rather than just actually dealing with score-based system this time around though, instead it's all about time attack based. So even then though, that if you want to actually just go for this entire mode with this little particular speedrun tactics, like I was about to be doing right there. Now I would normally originally was trying to do this run through on this particular playthrough originally, but it plays exactly like how it does it from before. Like you're still able to actually tackle through the exact same world. One exception, but in forms of the Fountain of Dreams, because I don't think Meta Knightmare can allow you to able to actually fight against with Knightmare all by himself. Unless if you're actually trying to use the cheat codes on the emulator and all that stuff. Which I could normally try to do that, but obviously I've no longer owned the emulator and all that stuff. But with that being said though, it's a pretty cool mode as it is. Like you can actually play as Meta Knight while actually going for the entire main game for a third time. And what's cool about Meta Knight though is the fact that you can able to actually use his sword to able to actually use the to attack enemies with, which I think is really, really cool. And even especially noticeable how the fact that he actually going to be going through, like, you know, the exact same worlds of how it doesn't work Kirby normally explored through, but in forms of you start off with Vegetable Valley all the way to the very end of Rainbow Resort, but except the fact the matter is there's no Fountain of Dreams level when you actually face off against with Knightmare as Meta Knight, because you know, Kirby is the only one who can save the day, which even then, that could have really appreciated with this kinds of stuff. However, I will admit though right away though, is that Meta Knight's, you know, antics, even especially noticeable by the forms of the actual, Meta Knight's mobility, wasn't exactly that great in my opinion. Well, as you can tell right there, every time when you try to swing his sword as Meta Knight though, sometimes he just pushes forwards a little bit, which almost feels exactly like how it does in the slippery traction in the forms of, you know, in Super Mario Bros. 2, the Lost Levels, that normally that Luigi managed to get himself his slippery shoes and all that stuff all the time. Which I feel like the same way as how it does it when Meta Knight usually comes into play with this particular mode itself. But it still looks pretty awesome as it is, but it wasn't until when we actually get into Kirby Superstar Ultra, and even especially noticeable with the forms of Kirby Planet Robobots for the 3DS. Thankfully though, the Meta Knight's antics, even with the mobility, managed to become very, very improvements. Whereas in this particular game, for this particular version of the game, for Kirby Knightmare and Dreamland, for this rendition of Meta Knight, it can be felt stiff in some areas, because even then, if you want to able to actually, although similar to how it does in forms of in Kirby for that respect, you can still actually perform himself this particular fly ability, but this time around though he actually got himself some wings. I think this might actually be the first time we're actually going to be playing as Meta Knight in the forms of the actual Kirby series for once. Well, at least until before Super Smash Bros. Brawl managed to able to actually make him his playable debut, and even especially noticeable by the forms of, you know, Kirby Superstar Ultra, as I mentioned this earlier, and also by the forms of, you know, Kirby's Adventure Wii, but in forms of the multiplayer aspect, and even especially noticeable but in forms of Kirby Planet Robobot, and even especially noticeable with Kirby Battle Royale, and even especially noticeably in the most recent title, Kirby Star Allies, one of the forms of the front stick. So even then, that's pretty cool and awesome at the same time, and even especially noticeable with Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U and / Nintendo 3DS. But I've noticed something back in Brawl is that Meta Knight is entirely broken in Brawl because of how the fact that you know, some of his attacks can go really overpowered and all that stuff. However, I'm not going to be showing through the entire main game again because it plays exactly like how it does in the forms of, you know, a normal game, especially with the extra game, but there are some slight differences, but in forms of, obviously, this is now time-based instead of score-based, and even especially noticeable that, oh my god, there's that double ganger of myself. Because obviously, this just feels like a reskin version of the forms of Kirby as a sword copy ability, except the fact that every time you jump, you can't able to actually deal with the 360 sword swing this time around though. On the other hand though, you can able to actually use the upward stab every time you actually press the directional pad up and B at the same time, until you're able to actually perform yourself a well-timed sword stab in the upwards. So yeah, it's a pretty cool stuff altogether though, because even then though, it plays exactly like how it does it where normal sword Kirby does. And if you can tell right there from the forms of the actual footage speak for itself, I'm actually going to be showcasing off some of these bosses yet again for a third time, but this time with the forms of Meta Knights. So with that being said, that as you can see right there, with Paint Roller right there, because of how the fact that, well, normally Meta Knight doesn't normally try to deal with copy abilities and all that stuff, and even then though, that maybe presents a little bit more extra killer and all that stuff, because he's actually using his sword for this entire time, which even then though, yeah, as you can see, I've actually did as a pretty cool badass run, especially noticeable how the fact that I'm actually going to be speeding things up with some of these bosses in this game, that you can able to actually just not to worry about the forms of certain copy abilities required, which even then, that does look pretty premise throughout. So yeah, that's what I can really say about it comes to extra stuff of how Kirby Knightmare in Dreamland actually functions well, at least as far as the actual, you know, extra stuff of how this game offers. Like, beating the game normally will actually gives you boss endurance in the forms of after beating the main game, which is pretty cool. Just like how it does in the forms of, you know, the original Kirby's Adventure, and also playing as Meta Knight is super awesome, just for actually able to actually after, you know, completing through extra game. It doesn't matter what accomplishments you're going to be going through, like going through extra mode normally, or just simply going for like 100% completion like I do. And also by the forms of how the fact that you can able to actually unlock extra game if you manage to get yourselves 100% in your normal gameplay. So yeah, you can able to actually just have a one-on-one fight against with the double ganger himself with Meta Knight. So yeah, eat that, faker! Come on. Oh wow, he's actually really well. He's doing really well. There we go. The amount of run-throughs I've done through with the forms of Meta Knightmare, I will admit though, I've actually managed to get myself 3 game overs in this run-through. That's only because of how the fact that with their mobility what the forms of Meta Knightmare himself actually plays as in the forms of this particular mode. But apart from that though, it's a pretty decent run-through I've ever done. But it still is a pretty awesome mode as it is. So yeah, you fight against with these bosses ranging from, you know, Wispy Woods all the way up to King Dedede, because, you know, there's no Nightmare final boss against with, you know, Meta Knight itself. But after when you beat the actual main Meta Knightmare, you get us this little congratulations screen, and especially noticeable that this Meta Knight is actually looking at the horizon. So yeah, that's a pretty cool rewards you can get. I don't think there's anything 100% rewards for anything like that. It's like you still have to going after every single switches, which is entirely up to you if you want to able to go for the game as normal, or especially noticeable if you want to complete the 100% completion run in the forms of Meta Knightmare. So yeah. So with that being said, folks, that was it for Kirby Knightmare in Dreamland. Definitely the most definitive way playing Kirby's Adventure if those of you haven't purchased the original game before. So yeah, this is me, Sylvester here, and until then, tune in next time by the forms of the Kirby Marathon Retrospective. Next up, we're going to be going through Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, also for the Game Boy Advance. So yeah, see you guys next time, and take care of yourselves, and have a great day. So see you guys then. Bye.